The contract said Emily Carter would belong to the Alpha King for 90 days, but the moment she signed her name, his wolf decided she belonged to him forever. She should have known nothing good waited inside Blackwood Hall when the rain turned the gravel drive silver and every guard at the gate looked at her like she was already guilty. Emily stood in the entryway with water dripping from the ends of her pale hair, one hand wrapped around the folder that held her sister's hospital bills, the other pressed against the spot on her chest where her heart kept trying to run. 3 hours ago, Caleb Reed had rejected her in front of the entire Ashbourne pack, his voice cold enough to make every whisper in the room feel like frost. Wolfless, useless, unfit to stand beside a real alpha. Those words had followed her across 40 miles of wet highway, through the iron gates of the royal estate, and now into the private office of Alexander Blackwood, the Alpha King himself. He sat behind a black oak desk, tall, still, and dangerous in the way winter was dangerous, not loud, not hurried, just certain. His dark blonde hair was brushed back from a face too controlled to be kind, and his gray eyes lifted to her with the weight of a command before he ever spoke. "Miss Carter," he said, and her name sounded different in his mouth, less like a mistake and more like a verdict. Emily forced herself not to lower her gaze. She had done that too many times today. Her stepfather had lowered his voice when he told her the royal tax collectors were coming. Caleb had lowered his when he said no alpha would ever claim a woman without a wolf. The nurse at the county clinic had lowered hers when she explained that Lily's treatment could not wait another month. Everyone lowered their voice around ruin, as if whispering made it kinder. Alexander slid a contract across the desk. 90 days, he said. You will appear beside me as my Luna. You will attend court functions, answer to the title, and convince the council I have made my choice. In exchange, your family debt disappears, your sister receives the best care in the kingdom, and no one from Ashbourne touches your future again. Emily stared at the signature line until the ink blurred. Fake Luna. Contract bride. Temporary woman. Even on paper, she sounded replaceable. Why me? She asked. His jaw tightened, so slightly most people would have missed it. Emily did not. Because the council expects me to choose a noble she-wolf, he said. And I need someone they cannot control. That should have made her feel powerful. Instead, it made her throat ache. There are rules, he continued. No affection in private. No claim. No mate bond. No misunderstanding what this is. A faint, humorless smile touched Emily's lips. Do not worry, Your Majesty. I have had enough rejection today to understand temporary. For the first time, something in his expression shifted. Not pity. Something sharper. Almost anger, though not at her. Emily picked up the pen. Her fingers trembled only once. She thought of Lily in a hospital bed with cartoon stickers on the rail. She thought of Caleb turning away as if 5 years of loyalty weighed nothing. She thought of the pack women watching her, waiting for her to break. Then she signed Emily Carter at the bottom of the page. The room changed. No window opened. No candle went out. But the air pressed tight around her skin, and somewhere behind Alexander's calm face, something ancient woke up. His hand gripped the edge of the desk. His eyes flashed, bright and wild for one impossible second. Emily froze. Your Majesty, she whispered. Alexander did not answer her. He was staring at her wrist, where the wet ink from the contract should have been the only dark mark on her skin. Instead, a thin silver line had appeared beneath her pulse, glowing softly, like moonlight trapped under flesh. His voice came out low, strained, and not entirely human. Leave. He ordered the guards without looking away from her. The doors closed at once. Emily could hear her own heartbeat, fast and uneven. Alexander rose from his chair, every inch of him controlled and yet barely holding something back. Emily, he said, and this time her name sounded like a warning. What are you? She swallowed, her fingers curling over the mark. I am nobody. His wolf answered before he could. A deep, invisible growl rolled through the room, wrapping around her bones with one word she felt more than heard. Real. Alexander Blackwood moved as if the room had betrayed him. One moment he stood behind the desk, eyes locked on the silver line beneath Emily's pulse, and the next he had turned away, both hands braced against the window frame while rain blurred the dark glass beyond it. Emily stayed where she was, too aware of the closed doors, the silent guards outside, the contract still lying between them like a trap that had already sprung. The glow on her wrist faded to a faint thread, but the feeling remained, warm and strange under her skin, as if something inside her had heard a voice it recognized before she did. "You should not be reacting to me," Alexander said. His voice was quieter now, and somehow that made it worse. "My wolf should not be reacting to anyone." Emily drew her hand to her chest. "Then maybe this is a mistake. Mistakes do not leave marks." He turned back slowly, and the control on his face looked less like calm now and more like a locked door with something pacing behind it. He opened a drawer, took out a second document, and placed it over the contract she had signed. "Read this before you sleep." Emily looked down. Addendum to Royal Companion Agreement. The title alone made her stomach tighten. She had thought the worst part was selling 90 days of her life to a king who needed her as a shield. She had been wrong. The first rule was simple: no public display beyond what court protocol required. The second, no private affection. The third, no shared sleeping chamber unless required by formal ceremony and witnessed by royal staff. The fourth, no disclosure of the contract under penalty of royal deception. The fifth made her breath stop. Under no circumstance shall the contracted Luna provoke, accept, or complete a mate claim with the Alpha King or his wolf. Provoke. Emily read the words softly, tasting the insult of it. "You think I would try to trick your wolf?" Alexander's eyes sharpened. "I think the council will say you did." "And what happens if they say that?" He did not answer quickly enough. The silence told her more than kindness would have. "A Luna who lies about a royal bond can be brought before the court," he said at last. "The council can strip her title, seize any payment made, and place her under permanent pack restriction." Emily heard what he did not say. She would lose Lily's care. She would lose protection from Ashbourne. She would lose the one bargain that had made humiliation bearable. Her hand curled around the edge of the paper. "So if your wolf decides I am real, I get punished for it." A muscle moved in his jaw. "That is why I will not allow it to happen." It should have comforted her. Instead, the promise settled cold in her ribs. Alexander rang for the housekeeper, and an older woman with silver hair and a straight spine entered as though she had spent her entire life refusing to be impressed by kings. "Mrs. Vale, Miss Carter will take the East Suite. No one enters without her permission. No one speaks to her about Ashbourne. No one uses the word fake in her hearing." Mrs. Vale looked at Emily only once, but it was not cruel. It was measuring, perhaps even protective. "Yes, Your Majesty." The palace corridors seemed endless after that. All black marble, old portraits, and windows tall enough to hold the storm. Emily followed Mrs. Vale past rooms full of polished silence, feeling the weight of invisible eyes. Servants bowed to Alexander when he appeared behind them, but they glanced at Emily the way people glanced at a crack in expensive glass. Not important enough to repair. Too obvious to ignore. Her suite was larger than the entire apartment she had shared with Lily. There was a sitting room with a fireplace, a bedroom dressed in ivory and blue, and a closet filled with gowns she had not chosen. On the bed lay a pale robe embroidered with the Blackwood crest, a black wolf beneath a silver moon. Emily touched the stitching and felt suddenly, painfully tired. "There is a bell beside the bed," Mrs. Vale said. "Ring if you need anything." "Can I call my sister?" Emily asked. The question came out smaller than she intended. Mrs. Vale's expression softened by one careful degree. "The king has already arranged a private line. The hospital will accept the transfer by morning." That was the first moment Emily almost cried. Not because Alexander had saved her. Not because the palace was beautiful. Because Lily would wake up and someone would finally say help was coming. When Mrs. Vale left, Emily locked the door and sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her damp dress, still holding the addendum. No affection. No claim. No mate bond. No misunderstanding. She repeated the rules until they felt like walls. But near midnight, the air changed. Emily woke from a thin, uneasy sleep with her heart already racing. Something stood outside her door. She could hear the slow drag of claws against stone, not frantic, not wild, but deliberate, as if whatever waited there knew exactly where she was. Then came a low sound, deep enough to tremble through the floor. Emily slipped from bed, wrapped the robe around herself, and crossed the room before fear could stop her. "Alexander," she whispered. No answer. Another scrape. Then a soft, rough exhale beneath the door, almost like a plea. Emily placed her palm against the wood. Heat met her from the other side. The silver thread at her wrist woke again, glowing faintly in the dark. A voice outside the door, strained and unmistakably Alexander's, said, "Do not open it." Her breath caught. "Why are you there?" Silence stretched, so long she thought he would not answer. Then his voice came again, lower than before. "Because he came to you." Emily looked down at the glowing mark, and for the first time that night, the rules felt less like protection and more like a warning neither of them was strong enough to obey. By morning, the palace had learned Emily Carter's name, and by breakfast, the court had already decided what it meant. Contract girl. Ashbourne reject. Temporary Luna. The words never reached her directly, not at first, but they traveled ahead of her through every corridor. Servants stopped speaking when she passed. Guards looked over her shoulder instead of at her face. Noble women in silk gowns tilted their heads together and smiled as if kindness itself had been trained out of them. Emily walked beside Mrs. Vale with her spine straight and her hands folded at her waist, trying not to think about the silver mark hidden beneath the cuff of her sleeve. She had slept for less than 2 hours after Alexander's voice had faded from the other side of her door. By dawn, there had been no sign of him, only 3 deep scratches in the black stone threshold and a single instruction delivered by Mrs. Vale. The first court presentation would take place at noon. A Luna gown had been prepared for her. The gown was white, which felt almost cruel. White was for purity of bloodline, for noble brides, for women who had been raised knowing how to stand under chandeliers without flinching. Emily had grown up in borrowed coats and clearance rack dresses, measuring groceries by the dollar and medicine by the week. The dress fit perfectly anyway, falling over her shoulders like moonlight and cinching at her waist with a silver belt shaped like twining wolves. Her pale hair was brushed until it shone, then pinned back with pearl combs that felt too delicate for a woman who had been rejected in a pack hall less than 24 hours earlier. When Mrs. Vale fastened the final clasp, Emily barely recognized the woman in the mirror. She looked calm. She looked expensive. She looked like a lie the whole palace was waiting to expose. "Keep your chin level," Mrs. Vale said. "Not high. They will call it arrogance. Not low. They will smell fear." Emily swallowed. "Is there a version where they just ignore me?" Mrs. Vale's mouth almost softened. "Not today." The throne room doors opened at noon with a sound like thunder trapped in wood. Emily stepped into a hall larger than any church she had ever seen, its ceiling arched with dark beams and silver banners, its walls lined with wolves carved from stone. At the far end stood the black throne, and on it sat Alexander Blackwood, wearing a dark suit and a crown of silver, so simple it looked more dangerous than gold. He did not lean. He did not fidget. He did not need to. Power gathered around him naturally, bending the room toward his silence. Every noble in the hall bowed when he lifted his hand. Then every eye turned to Emily. Heat climbed her neck. The walk to the throne felt longer than 40 miles. Each step echoed too clearly. She heard. The first whisper by the 3rd step. "That is her." By the 5th, another. "She does not even have a wolf." By the 7th, a soft laugh. The king must be desperate. Emily kept walking. Her heart struck hard against her ribs, but she kept her chin level, exactly as Mrs. Vale had told her. She was 15 feet from the throne when Vanessa Whitmore stepped into her path. Vanessa was beautiful in the effortless way of people who had never wondered whether they belonged in a room. Dark red hair, pearl skin, a navy gown cut with royal precision, and a smile polished sharp enough to draw blood without touching. Behind her, half the court leaned closer. "Miss Carter," Vanessa said, sweetly enough for everyone to hear. "Forgive me. I am only trying to understand the new standards of the crown. How much does a fake Luna cost these days?" The room went silent, so quickly Emily heard the faint crackle of the torches along the wall. Her stomach dropped. For one terrible second, she was back in Ashbourne, standing beneath Caleb Reed's cold stare while the pack waited for her to crumble. The same old shame rose up, familiar as a hand around her throat. She thought of Lily. She thought of the hospital transfer. She thought of the contract in Alexander's desk and the rules that said she must not let this become real. So she smiled, even though her lips felt numb. "More than I thought," Emily said softly. "But apparently less than honesty costs here." A few gasps broke through the hall. Vanessa's eyes flashed. "Careful. A rented cloak does not make you royal." Emily opened her mouth, but before she could answer, the temperature in the room seemed to fall. Alexander had risen from the throne. No one spoke. No one moved. He descended the steps slowly, each footstep measured, his gray eyes not on Vanessa but on Emily, as if the entire court had become background noise. When he reached her, he removed the black and silver cloak from his own shoulders. The royal crest shimmered across it, a black wolf beneath a moon. He placed it around Emily without asking the court for permission. The fabric settled warm and heavy over her gown, carrying his scent, cedar, rain, and something wild. She did not have a name for. The silver mark beneath her sleeve pulsed once. Alexander turned to Vanessa. His voice was calm, and that made it merciless. More than your bloodline can afford. The hall held its breath. Vanessa's smile disappeared. Emily looked up at him, startled by the anger she saw there. Not uncontrolled, not loud, but focused like a blade behind glass. He offered his arm. Publicly. Deliberately. In front of every noble who had been waiting to see her humiliated. Emily knew taking it would make the whispers worse. She also knew refusing would tell them she was ashamed. So she placed her hand on his sleeve. The moment her fingers touched him, the royal banners above the throne stirred though there was no wind. Somewhere deep beneath the marble floor, something answered with a low, ancient hum. Alexander went still. Emily felt it too, under her shoes, inside her bones, beneath the mark at her wrist. The throne room was no longer laughing. It was listening. Alexander did not let go of Emily's hand until they reached the private corridor behind the throne room, and even then, he released her as if touching her had burned through every rule he had written himself. The door shut behind them, cutting off the murmurs of the court, but the silence that followed was worse. Emily stood beneath a row of narrow windows while gray afternoon light spilled over the royal cloak still wrapped around her shoulders. It was too heavy, too warm, too full of him. Cedar, rain, and that wild midnight scent clung to the fabric, making her pulse unsteady in a way she did not understand and did not trust. Alexander paced once to the end of the corridor, stopped, and turned back with the discipline of a man dragging himself away from the edge of something dangerous. You should not have answered, Vanessa, he said. Emily blinked. After everything that had happened, that was what he chose to say. She asked what I cost. And you gave the court something to remember. They were going to remember me anyway. His eyes sharpened, but she saw the truth beneath his irritation. He was not angry because she had embarrassed him. He was angry because she had stood in front of wolves who wanted to tear her down and made herself visible. Visibility, in this palace, seemed to be its own kind of danger. Emily pulled the cloak tighter. You told me to convince them I was Luna. I cannot do that by standing there like furniture. Something almost like approval crossed his face, and then he crushed it before it could live. You do not know what they do to people they cannot control. I am learning quickly. The silver mark beneath her cuff pulsed once, and Alexander's gaze dropped instantly, as if he felt it before he saw it. Emily stepped back. He noticed. His jaw tightened. I will not hurt you, he said. The words came too fast, too rough, like a promise he had made before and failed to believe. Emily's breath slowed. I did not say you would. You thought it. I thought you looked afraid. That stopped him completely. Outside the windows, rain slid in thin lines down the glass. For several seconds, Alexander Blackwood, Alpha King, ruler of every pack from the northern lakes to the southern desert, said nothing at all. Then he looked away first. My wolf chose before I did, he said quietly. That is not romantic, Emily. That is dangerous. Her name in his voice was becoming a problem. Every time he said it, it sounded less like a formality and more like something he was trying not to keep. Why? She asked. He should have dismissed her. He should have reminded her of the contract and sent her back to her rooms. Instead, he leaned one shoulder against the stone wall, suddenly looking older than the crown had made him appear. Royal wolves are not like ordinary wolves. They do not suggest. They command. They bond deeply, fiercely, and sometimes without mercy to the person they believe is theirs. Emily felt the air leave her slowly. And you think that means you would take my choice away? His silence answered. Something inside her softened despite herself. Not forgiveness. Not trust. Recognition. He was not avoiding her because she disgusted him. He was avoiding her because every instinct in him wanted to move closer, and he feared what closeness could cost her. Is that what happened before? She asked. Alexander's face closed, but not before she saw the wound behind it. My father loved my mother, he said. The whole kingdom called it legendary. Then his wolf began to see every disagreement as betrayal, every distance as abandonment, every fear as rejection. Their bond became a cage. She spent her final years smiling in public and disappearing in private. I was 12 when I realized love could look like protection and still leave someone with no room to breathe. Emily's throat tightened. No graphic story could have hurt more than the restraint in his voice. So you decided never to claim anyone. I decided no woman would become a prisoner because my wolf mistook need for love. She looked down at the cloak, at the royal crest resting over her heart. Then why put this on me in front of everyone? His eyes lifted to hers. For a moment, the king was gone and only the man remained. Because Vanessa wanted you to feel small. A simple answer. A devastating one. Emily had spent years waiting for someone to notice when words cut, when laughter bruised, when shame filled a room so completely she could hardly breathe. Alexander had noticed. He had noticed and answered in the only language his court respected. Power. The corridor seemed to shrink around them. Emily became aware of the space between his hand and hers, not touching, not even close, but charged with the knowledge that both of them were thinking about it. Then a low growl rolled from somewhere deeper in the palace. Alexander went rigid. Emily turned toward the sound. Was that yours? Stay here. That is becoming your favorite command. He gave her a look that should have frightened her, but only made her pulse jump. Emily. The growl came again. Closer now, not threatening her, never her, but restless and desperate, like a storm pacing behind a locked door. The silver mark on her wrist brightened beneath her sleeve. Alexander stepped back as if distance could solve what blood and moonlight had already begun. Do not follow me, he said. Then he walked away too quickly for a man who claimed he was in control. Emily waited exactly 10 seconds before she followed. She found him in the Old West Gallery, where portraits of dead Blackwood kings watched from gilded frames. Alexander stood before a sealed iron door, one hand pressed flat against it. From the other side came the sound of claws scraping stone, slow and pleading. His wolf was not trying to escape into the palace. It was trying to reach her. Emily stopped several feet away. Alexander closed his eyes. You were told to stay. I have been told many things by men who thought obedience was the same as safety. His hand flexed against the door. You should be afraid. Emily looked at the iron door, at the king holding himself between her and the creature that had already chosen her, and then at the silver mark glowing brighter with every heartbeat. I am, she whispered, but not of him. The scraping stopped. Behind the door, the wolf went utterly still, as if it had understood every word. The West Gallery incident should have frightened Emily back into obedience, but by the next morning, fear had changed shape inside her. It was still there, tucked beneath her ribs, but it no longer pointed only at Alexander or the palace or the ancient wolf behind the iron door. It pointed at the court, at the smiles too polished to be kind, at Vanessa Whitmore's perfume lingering in hallways where she had not been invited, at the council members who watched Emily as if waiting for the exact moment she would prove she never belonged. Breakfast was held in the sunroom, a glass-walled chamber overlooking the palace gardens, where rain had left every hedge shining and every stone path silver. Emily sat at Alexander's right because protocol demanded it, not because he had asked. He had barely spoken since the gallery. He looked composed, of course. He always looked composed. But his fingers rested too still beside his coffee cup, and every time Emily moved, his attention found her before his eyes did. The court noticed. Vanessa noticed most of all. You look tired, Miss Carter, Vanessa said from across the long table, her smile delicate enough to pass for concern. Palace life can be overwhelming for someone and used to responsibility. Emily lifted her cup with steady hands. Responsibility does not scare me. Vanessa's gaze flicked to the royal cloak Emily no longer wore, then to Alexander. No, I imagine pretending does. Before Emily could answer, a young royal guard near the door swayed. His hand tightened around the silver tray he carried. The teacups trembled softly, porcelain clicking like nervous teeth. Another guard beside him reached out, then froze as his own face went pale. The room changed instantly. Chairs scraped back. Someone gasped. Mrs. Vale moved first, but Emily was already standing. She did not think. She crossed the room, caught the edge of the tray before it fell, and smelled it. Not the tea, not the sugar, the small bowl of honey beside it. Bitter green under sweetness. Wolfsbane. Her stomach dropped, but her voice came out clear. Do not drink anything. Every eye turned to her. Alexander was beside her in one stride. Emily. The honey has been touched. The guard lowered himself carefully into a chair, breathing hard but awake, while Mrs. Vale called for the healer. Emily set the tray on a side table and looked over the breakfast service. The court had gone silent in that particular way people did when disaster presented them with entertainment. Councilman Hale, a narrow man with silver spectacles and a permanent look of disappointment, stepped forward. That is a serious accusation from a woman who entered the palace yesterday. Emily looked at him. It is not an accusation. It is a warning. And how would a wolfless girl recognize wolfsbane before trained guards did? The word struck exactly where he intended. Wolfless. Lowly. Unfit. Alexander's presence sharpened beside her, but Emily shook her head once before he could speak. This had to be hers. Because my mother kept an herb shop near the Ashbourne border, she said. Because wolves used to come in hiding fevers, scent burns, and old injuries they did not want their alphas to know about. Because she taught me that wolfsbane under honey smells like cut grass left too long in the sun. She picked up the small silver spoon and held it close, not touching the honey to her skin. And because whoever did this tried to hide the scent with rose oil. A tiny shift moved through the room. Too small for most, but Emily saw. Vanessa's fingers still against her napkin. Rose oil. The same soft floral scent that had followed her in the corridor, clung to her gloves in the throne room, and now floated faintly beneath the bitterness in the honey. Vanessa laughed lightly. How convenient. The contract girl becomes a healer overnight. Emily turned to her. Not a healer. Just someone used to being ignored while useful things were said in front of her. Mrs. Vale returned with the palace healer, a calm older man who examined the guards and confirmed quickly that the exposure was mild and treatable. Relief moved through the servants like released breath. The guards would recover. No one had been seriously harmed. But the danger had been real enough to chill every voice in the sunroom. Councilman Hale adjusted his spectacles. The source must be investigated. Of course, Vanessa said smoothly, starting with the person closest to the service table when it was discovered. Her eyes settled on Emily. A frightened girl desperate to make herself valuable might create the very crisis she solves. Emily felt the room tilt toward that possibility. It was absurd, and yet power did not need truth to become dangerous. It only needed a version of events spoken by the right mouth. Her pulse beat against the silver mark, hidden but awake. Alexander's voice cut through the room, quiet and absolute. Enough. Vanessa bowed her head. Your Majesty, I only mean to protect the court. No, Alexander said. You mean to make the court afraid of her. He looked to the healer. Seal the service room. Question every attendant. Test every bottle of oil, every glove, every handkerchief, and every flower arrangement delivered this morning. For the first time, Vanessa's smile strained. Emily noticed. Alexander noticed Emily noticing. That mattered more than any declaration could have. When the room began to empty, the young guard she had helped looked up at her, embarrassment and gratitude mingling on his face. Thank you, my lady. My lady. Not contract girl. Not fake Luna. Not Miss Carter. The title landed softly, but it changed something. Emily nodded, unsure what to do with the warmth rising in her chest. Alexander watched her from only a few feet away, and there was no pity in his expression now. No reluctant obligation. Only respect, sharp and unguarded enough to make her look away first. Later, as Mrs. Vale escorted the guards to the infirmary and the council whispered among themselves, Emily found a single white rose tucked beneath the edge of the breakfast cart. Its petals were perfect. Its stem was wrapped in a navy silk thread the exact shade of Vanessa's gown. Emily picked it up carefully. Beneath the rose oil, beneath the honey, beneath the fear the court wanted her to feel, there was another scent, faint as a secret. Ashbourne pine. Caleb Reed had been inside Blackwood Hall. Caleb Reed should not have been able to enter Blackwood Hall, but Shame had always known how to find Emily no matter how many doors stood between them. By late afternoon, the palace had become a hive of careful footsteps and lowered voices. The poisoned honey had been removed, the young guards were recovering in the infirmary, and every servant assigned to the breakfast service had been questioned twice. Still, Emily could feel the truth moving beneath the polished floors like water under thin ice. Someone had brought Caleb inside. Someone had wanted her to smell Ashbourne pine and understand that the life she escaped had not finished reaching for her. Alexander ordered the outer gate sealed and doubled the guards around Lily's hospital wing before Emily even asked. That should have comforted her, but comfort felt fragile in a place where kindness could be turned into evidence. At sunset, Mrs. Vale came to Emily's suite with a dark blue gown and a face carefully emptied of expression. "The emergency council has been called," she said. Emily stood from the window seat. "Because of the honey?" Mrs. Vale paused just long enough to make Emily's hands go cold. "Because Lord Hale received a document." The world narrowed to the rustle of rain against glass. Emily knew before she asked. Her stomach knew. Her wrist knew. The silver mark under her sleeve warmed, as if warning her too late. The council chamber was smaller than the throne room, but somehow worse. There were no distant corners to disappear into, no long aisle to measure each breath. Just a circle of black stone seats, a raised place for the king, and 12 nobles watching Emily enter as if she had already confessed. Vanessa stood near Lord Hale in a gown the color of winter roses, her hands folded, her expression wounded with perfect sincerity. Caleb stood beside her in formal black, his golden hair brushed smooth, his face arranged into the same noble calm he used the day he rejected her. Emily stopped breathing for half a second. He smiled at her, as if they were old friends meeting at church. "Emily," he said softly. Alexander's hand settled at the small of her back. Not possessive, not public performance, just steady enough to remind her that she did not have to step backward. "Do not speak to her," Alexander said. Caleb bowed. "Of course, Your Majesty. I only came because the council deserves the truth." Lord Hale lifted a folder sealed with the royal crest. The contract, not a copy. The original addendum, with Alexander's private signature and Emily's name written in ink that now felt like a chain around her throat. "This council has received evidence," Hale said, "that Miss Carter was not chosen as Luna by sacred bond, blood recognition, or royal intention, but hired under temporary terms to deceive the court." The words landed one by one, each one striking a different bruise. Hired, temporary, deceive. Around the circle, nobles began to whisper. Vanessa lowered her eyes as if the scandal pained her personally. "I warned everyone we should be careful," she murmured. Emily looked at Caleb. "You stole it." He tilted his head. "You signed it." The room shifted toward him. That was the cruel genius of it. He did not need to lie. He only needed to place the truth in hands that would use it like a knife made of words. "She came to the crown desperate," Caleb continued, voice mild. "Rejected by her own pack. Without a wolf. Without standing. She has been playing at nobility for 2 days, and already poison appears at the royal table. Guards fall ill, and the king behaves as though bewitched." Alexander moved so suddenly every voice died. He did not touch Caleb. He did not need to. The air itself seemed to bow away from him. "Choose your next words with care." Caleb went pale, but Vanessa stepped in before fear could ruin him. "Your Majesty, this is exactly why the court is concerned. Your judgment is compromised. A true Luna strengthens a king. This girl makes you threaten your own subjects." Emily felt every eye turn to Alexander, waiting. If he denied the contract, they would call him a liar. If he admitted it, they would call her fraud. If he abandoned her, the court would forgive him by morning. That was what power always offered men like him. A door out, paid for by the woman left behind. Emily straightened before he could speak. "I did sign it," she said. The chamber held still. Her voice trembled, but it did not break. "I signed because my sister needed medical care. I signed because my stepfather's debt would have taken everything we had left. I signed because yesterday morning, the man standing beside Lady Vanessa rejected me in front of my pack and called me worthless." Caleb's smile vanished. Good, Emily thought, with a small, bright spark of satisfaction. Let the truth burn everyone. But I did not poison anyone. I did not ask His Majesty's wolf to react to me. I did not create the mark on my wrist. Hale's eyes narrowed. A mark no one has been permitted to inspect. Vanessa stepped closer, voice ringing with false sorrow. "Then let us inspect it now. Let the court see what trick she has painted on her skin." Alexander's hand left Emily's back. For a painful second, she thought he was stepping away. Instead, he stepped forward, placing himself between Emily and the circle. No, Hale stood. Your Majesty, refusal will be treated as obstruction. Then treat it that way. Alexander's voice was quiet, but the room seemed to shrink around it. Punish me. I signed it first. Emily's heart struck so hard she felt it in her fingertips. Vanessa stared at him as if he had broken a law older than language. Perhaps he had. Kings protected crowns. They did not place themselves beside contract girls. They did not turn shared blame into shelter. Hale looked around the chamber, gathering courage from the watching nobles. Then there is only one lawful path. At tomorrow night's blood moon, Miss Carter will enter the sacred forest for the Luna trial. If the ancient wolves recognize her, the matter ends. If they do not, the contract is void, her title is stripped, and your Majesty's fitness to rule will be reviewed. The words settled like frost. Emily had heard stories of the sacred forest as a child, the place where false claims unraveled and true bonds could not hide. She had also heard that women without wolves did not walk out unchanged. Alexander turned to her, and for the first time since she met him, fear crossed his face openly. Not for his crown, for her. Emily looked past him at Caleb, at Vanessa, at the council waiting for her to crumble, and felt the silver mark glow beneath her sleeve. Fine, she said, her voice barely above a whisper but clear enough for every wolf in the room to hear. I will take the trial. From somewhere beneath the palace, the royal wolf answered with a single mournful howl. By the time the blood moon rose, Blackwood Hall had stopped pretending Emily Carter was a guest. She was escorted through the eastern gates in a white trial cloak, not the royal one Alexander had placed on her shoulders, but a plain garment without crest, rank, or protection. The council walked behind her in ceremonial silence. Vanessa stood among them with a silver circlet in her red hair, beautiful as a portrait and just as cold. Caleb watched from the outer steps, his expression carefully blank, but Emily saw the satisfaction hiding in his eyes. He had wanted her back in front of an audience. He had wanted another pack to witness her being unwanted. Only this time, the audience was not Ashbourne. It was every noble house in the kingdom, gathered beneath a moon the color of old wine, waiting to see whether the forest would reject her too. Alexander walked at her side until the black stone archway appeared between the trees. Beyond it, the sacred forest breathed in silver fog and shadow. No torches were allowed past the entrance. No guards. No king. No witness except whatever ancient wolves lived under those trees. Emily felt Alexander stop beside her. His hand did not touch her, but she felt the restraint in it, the effort it took him not to reach. You do not have to prove yourself to them, he said quietly. Emily looked at the archway. Yes, I do. His jaw tightened. Emily. She turned to him then, and for one heartbeat the court disappeared. There was only the man who had signed a cold contract, the king who had shielded her before his council, and the wolf behind his eyes watching her, as though every step she took away from him pulled at something buried deep in his chest. All my life, she said, people told me what I was before I had the chance to become anything. Wolfless, useless, temporary. I am tired of surviving other people's verdicts. The silver mark beneath her sleeve warmed, and Alexander's expression changed, not with command, but with grief. If the forest frightens you, call my name. They said no one can enter after me. I did not say I would obey. That should have made her smile. Instead, it made her chest ache. Emily stepped through the arch before courage could leave her. The sound of the court vanished behind her as if a door had closed underwater. The forest smelled of wet bark, cold earth, and something older than any palace. She walked slowly, counting her breaths, listening to the crunch of leaves beneath her thin shoes. After 10 minutes, the fog thickened until the world became a tunnel of pale light and black branches. After 20, the mark on her wrist began to glow through the fabric. After 30, she heard the first howl. It did not sound like a threat. It sounded like recognition from far away. Emily stopped in a clearing where moonlight spilled over a circle of stones. At the center stood a white tree, its bark smooth as bone, its branches bare though spring waited just beyond the mountains. Her mother had told her about this tree once, in the voice she used when stories were not only stories. First Luna's tree, she had called it. Emily had forgotten until now, or thought she had. The memory returned with the scent of lavender soap, warm hands braiding her hair, and her mother whispering, "If the world ever calls you empty, remember that some seeds sleep underground for years before they break open." Emily pressed a hand to her mouth as the ache hit. Her mother had not been just an herb woman. She had known. She had known something about Emily and hidden it carefully enough to die with it. Or so Emily had believed. A pale shape moved between the trees. Emily went still. A white wolf stepped into the clearing, larger than any wolf she had ever seen, its fur shining with moonlight, its eyes the same blue-gray as her mother's. Emily should have run. Instead, tears burned behind her eyes. "Are you real?" she whispered. The wolf lowered its head, and the silver mark on Emily's wrist flared bright enough to light the stones. The world shifted. Not outside her. Inside. Something locked behind her ribs turned like a key. Pain did not come. Terror did not come. What came was space. A vast, quiet opening where she had always believed there was nothing. Emily fell to her knees, not from weakness but from the force of finally feeling herself answer back. A presence rose within her, gentle and enormous, not borrowed from Alexander, not granted by the court, not invented by desperation. Hers. Her wolf. A memory unfolded with it, not in words at first, but in scent and light. Her mother standing before Vanessa's father years ago, refusing to surrender a child with first Luna blood. A small silver charm pressed beneath baby Emily's skin to hide the scent. A promise whispered over a cradle. A warning that noble houses would rather call a girl wolfless than allow the old bloodline to return. Emily's breath shook. They lied. The white wolf blinked slowly, and in that silence, Emily understood the answer. They had not only lied. They had built her whole life around the lie. A twig snapped at the edge of the clearing. Emily stood quickly. Vanessa stepped from the fog, her gown hidden beneath a dark cloak, her face stripped of its courtly softness. In her hand was not a weapon raised to harm, but a silver ritual blade used to cut trial vines and mark the old stones. Still, the sight made Emily's blood run cold. "So it is true," Vanessa said. "Your mother's mistake survived." Emily backed toward the white tree, the wolf inside her no longer sleeping, no longer silent. "My mother was. Not a mistake." Vanessa's smile trembled with anger. "Your mother was a servant with dangerous blood. She would have ended the council's authority. You will do the same if Alexander claims you." The pieces locked together so sharply Emily almost staggered. The poison honey. The stolen contract. Caleb's entrance. Vanessa had not been fighting a fake Luna. She had been hunting the real one before Emily knew what she was. From somewhere beyond the clearing, a deep black howl tore through the fog, Alexander's wolf answering the part of her that had finally awakened. The white wolf beside Emily lifted its head and howled back, and every tree in the sacred forest bowed under the sound. The sacred forest did not let Vanessa finish her threat. The moment the white wolf howled, the fog drew back from the clearing as if the moon itself had taken a breath, and every old stone around First Luna's tree began to shine. Vanessa's face changed then, not into fear exactly, but into the fury of someone watching a locked door open for the wrong woman. Emily stood beneath the bare white branches with the silver mark blazing at her wrist, no longer cold, no longer small, no longer empty. Her wolf was awake inside her, vast and calm, and older than every insult ever used to cage her. "You cannot take this back to court," Vanessa said, her voice tight enough to crack. "They will follow you. The old houses will lose everything." Emily looked at the ritual blade in Vanessa's hand, then at the white wolf beside her. The wolf did not lunge. It did not snarl. It simply stepped forward, and the power in that single motion made Vanessa stumble back against the moonlit stones. "You mean you will lose everything," Emily said. For the first time in her life, her voice did not shake when power stood in front of her. From beyond the clearing came the sound of breaking branches, fast footsteps, and a command that seemed to roll through the forest before the man appeared. "Emily." Alexander crossed the clearing like the rules had never existed. His crown was gone, his dark coat open at the throat, his gray eyes wild with the kind of fear he had spent years pretending kings did not feel. He stopped, only when he saw the white wolf at Emily's side. The entire forest went still. His gaze moved from the wolf to Emily's glowing wrist, then to her face, and something in him softened so completely it hurt to see. You found her, he said. Emily did not have to ask who he meant. Her wolf rose under her skin like moonlight under water. Vanessa recovered quickly, because people raised in court learned to turn panic into accusation. Your Majesty, step away from her. She has manipulated the trial. She brought unknown magic into the sacred forest. Alexander did not even look at her. No, the word was quiet, final, and for once it was not a command meant to cage Emily. It was a door closing against everyone who wanted to. The council arrived moments later at the archway, breathless, furious, and shaken by the howls that had pulled them from ceremonial waiting into something no one controlled. Lord Hale was first into the clearing. Caleb followed behind him, his face pale beneath the moonlight. When he saw the white wolf, the silver stones, and Emily standing at the center of it all, his confidence drained away. Impossible, Hale whispered. Vanessa seized the word like a lifeline. Exactly. This is a trick. She is a rejected Ashbourne girl with no wolf. Ask Caleb. Ask anyone who knew her. Caleb opened his mouth, but the white wolf turned its head toward him. He flinched as if the truth had looked directly into him. Emily felt no satisfaction in his fear, only distance. He had become smaller the moment she stopped needing him to tell her what she was. Alexander stepped beside Emily, close enough that his sleeve brushed hers, still not taking her hand, still letting the choice remain visible between them. The trial asked for recognition, he said to the council. You have it. Hale's face hardened. The council has not verified the nature of this bond. Then verify it here, Emily said. Every head turned toward her. She looked at the men and women who had called her temporary without knowing her name, who had weighed her worth in bloodline, money, and usefulness. I was told the sacred forest would reject a false Luna. It did not. I was told a wolfless woman could not enter and return with power. I did. I was told a contract made me fake. But the contract did not wake my wolf. The white wolf moved to her side. At the same time, from the far edge of the clearing, Alexander's black wolf emerged from the trees. No chain held him now, no iron door, no buried shame. He was enormous and silent, with eyes fixed not on the council, not on Vanessa, but on Emily's wolf. The two wolves faced each other beneath the blood moon. The air hummed. The stones answered. Emily felt Alexander tense beside her, not with fear of the bond, but with fear of taking too much. His voice lowered for her alone. I will not claim you because they demand proof. Emily looked at him, and all the rules, contracts, insults, and warnings fell away until only the truth remained. He had protected her reputation. He had risked his crown. But the one thing he still refused to steal was her choice. So Emily reached for his hand. His breath caught when her fingers closed around his. Then claim me because I choose you, she said. The mark at her wrist flared silver. Alexander's eyes closed for one shattering second, as if mercy had finally found the place in him that fear had ruled for years. Then he took off the royal signet ring from his hand, placed it on the nearest stone, and bowed his head before her in front of the entire council. I choose Emily Carter, he said, voice carrying through the forest. Not as contract, not as shield, not as duty, as my real Luna, if she will have me. The black wolf lowered itself before the white wolf. Not conquered, reverent. The sacred stones burst into pale light, and ancient words appeared across their surfaces, bright enough for every witness to read. First Luna blood returns. True bond recognized. Silence crashed over the clearing. Vanessa stepped back, shaking her head. No. Hale dropped to one knee first, not because he wanted to, but because pack law moved through him before pride could stop it. One by one, the nobles followed. Caleb was last. He stared at Emily as if seeing the woman he had rejected had been the greatest mistake of his life. Emily did not look away. She let him see her standing there beside the Alpha King, her white wolf awake, the court kneeling, and the word fake dying in every mouth that had ever used it against her. By dawn, the blood moon had faded, but the kingdom had not returned to what it was before. Some changes happened loudly, with bells, proclamations, and council seals broken in public. Others happened quietly, in the way guards who had once looked through Emily now lowered their heads when she passed, in the way servants no longer stopped speaking when she entered a room, in the way Mrs. Vale stood at the foot of the grand staircase with tears bright in her eyes and still somehow managed to look stern about it. Blackwood Hall seemed different under morning light. The marble was still black, the banners still silver, the throne still carved from ancient stone, but the palace no longer felt like a place waiting for Emily to make a mistake. It felt like a place that had finally been caught in one of its own lies. Vanessa Whitmore stood before the council before noon, no circlet in her hair, no soft smile prepared for the court. The evidence was laid out carefully, not as gossip, not as revenge, but as truth. The rose oil from her chambers matched the scent used in the poisoned honey. The stolen contract had passed through her private messenger. Caleb Reed admitted he had been brought into Blackwood Hall under her family seal after being promised favor in the royal court if he helped prove Emily was a fraud. No one raised a hand. No one needed to. Power, when stripped of secrecy, often became small enough to fit inside a signed confession. Vanessa was removed from the council line and sent back to Whitmore territory under royal restriction, her house placed under review until every old record connected to Emily's mother could be restored. Caleb was returned to Ashbourne with his claim rights suspended and a public order forbidding him from contacting Emily or Lily again. Emily listened to the judgments from beside Alexander, not because she enjoyed watching them fall, but because the girl who had been humiliated in public deserved to witness the truth spoken in public too. When Caleb's eyes found hers, they carried an apology he had no right to ask her to accept. Emily did not hate him. That surprised her. She simply felt the final thread between them loosen and disappear. After the chamber emptied, Alexander remained near the council table, one hand resting on the contract that had started everything. The papers looked ordinary now. Thin, breakable. Strange, how something so small had once felt powerful enough to define her life. Emily stood across from him in the quiet, wearing a simple cream dress Mrs. Vale had chosen because, in her words, a real Luna did not need to sparkle to be seen. Alexander's crown rested on the table beside the contract. The Luna ring lay beside it, silver set with a moonstone that seemed to hold a softer light than any jewel Emily had ever seen. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Beyond the tall windows, late snow began to fall, light and unexpected, dusting the gardens white. "I owe you freedom before I ask for anything else," Alexander said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were not. He picked up the contract, including every addendum, every rule meant to keep distance between them, every line that had called her temporary. Then he tore it cleanly in half. The sound was soft, almost nothing, and still Emily felt it through her whole body. He placed the torn pages on the table and stepped back, leaving space between them on purpose. No more pretending. No more terms. No more protection that becomes a cage. He touched the crown first. "This is the kingdom. It will ask much of you." Then the ring. "This is the bond. It will ask honesty of both of us." Then he moved both aside, leaving the polished wood bare. "And this is nothing. You can choose that too. You can walk out of this room, take Lily anywhere in the country, and you will still have my protection, my respect, and every promise I made before I knew who you were." Emily looked at the empty space on the table longer than she expected. Once, nothing would have been safety. No court, no whispers, no title heavy enough to crush her. But nothing was not what waited inside her anymore. Her wolf stirred gently, not pushing, not pleading, simply present. Hers. Emily thought of her mother hiding her bloodline. Not because Emily was weak, but because the world had been afraid of what she might become. She thought of Lily calling that morning, crying because royal doctors had arrived, and because, for the first time in months, she sounded hopeful. She thought of Alexander outside her door, afraid of his own wolf, and Alexander in the forest, willing to lose a crown rather than force a claim. "I do not want to be chosen because a stone said so," Emily said. "I do not want to be kept because your wolf knew first. And I do not want to be Luna because the court finally decided I am useful." Alexander's face went very still. Emily reached for the ring. "I choose this because you gave me the right to choose nothing." His breath caught, and the raw relief in his eyes nearly broke her. He did not rush forward. He did not take the ring from her hand. He waited while Emily slid it onto her own finger. The moonstone warmed against her skin, and somewhere deep in the palace, the black wolf howled, not in hunger, not in command, but in joy. Emily's white wolf answered from within her, calm and bright as snowfall. That evening, the throne room filled again, but not with laughter, accusation, or waiting cruelty. The court knelt as Emily walked beside Alexander, not behind him, not beneath him, but beside him. At the foot of the black throne, he bowed his head to her before he sat, and every noble in the room understood the lesson. The girl they had called fake had become the woman they had to honor. Outside, moonlight poured over Blackwood Hall. Snow covered the old footprints in the garden. Two